Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're going to talk about why I think I may have bought the wrong machine when I bought this Can-Am. So there's a lot of good things to say about this machine. It's a great family machine. It's been really reliable. I've taken it into some spots that I didn't even think it would go. And I've had very little issue with it. I've had one coolant leak, took it to the dealer, they fixed it. It was out for half a day, they got it fixed. I think there's a little elbow on top of the engine that cracked. It's plastic from what I understand. If it does it again, I'll probably put a metal one in its place. It'll be out of warranty by then, so I'll probably do that myself. Other than that, no real issues with the machine. We did poke a hole in the floorboard on the passenger side, and that was my fault. I was out bawhawing through timber and over logs, kind of like I would on, a four-wheeler or dirt bike, and a stub come up and went right through that floorboard. Not a real big hole, but I still have the piece of plastic. I'll probably plastic weld that back in one of these days. I haven't got around to it yet. And like I said, it's been a great machine for touring out in the for family time, enjoying the mountains, getting into some pretty remote locations with it, even though it's kind of low to the ground. The thing I said on the first video about why we bought this machine is we were looking for not a one-purpose machine. We were looking for a utility machine and a sport machine, not just one or the other. So we chose this machine, and it actually fits that bill really well. But there's some things I want to talk about today on why I think we bought the wrong machine for us. And some other things now that the new and shiny has wore off for us. Some things I can tell you about that I like and dislike about this machine. Since we're going on 2 years of owning it now. And we got about 1,400 miles on it. Last summer we didn't get out as much as we wanted. Things just didn't work out great the last half of the summer. But let me go over some of these things with you and maybe help you make a decision if you're thinking about one of these. Now, even though this machine is lower to the ground than some machines, I'm up here in about 2 feet of snow today. You know, the first 8 inches or so of pretty puffy snow. And I didn't put my full windshield on because one of the drawbacks to the full windshield, if it's the factory windshield, it's plastic. So there's no wipers on it, because if you wiped them all the time, it would scratch the heck out of it. So when you're going up through snow like this, especially puffy snow, all it does is cake over with snow and ice, and you're constantly out there trying to wipe it off and try not to scratch it. So I just said, heck with it. I'll just go with the half windshield. The only problem is I forgot my goggles, so it was kind of an exciting ride coming in here. But it trudges through the snow pretty darn well for as low as it sits. And one of the reasons is it's pretty well balanced with that Midship engine. And I'll go into the Midship thing here in a minute on the positive and negatives about having a Midship engine like this machine has. But before we dive into some of the negatives about the machine, let me say that it's been extremely reliable. We enjoy the heck out of it. The seats, like I said in the original video, are extremely comfortable in this thing. I've got a bad back that I've broke twice, and usually rigs bug my back after a short period of time. There's very few rigs that I can sit in comfortably and go for long rides. This thing, we can go on 100+ mile rides, and my back really doesn't bother me much. So I'm really happy with the seats in this thing. The rear seats are not quite as nice as the front seats. They're still okay, especially for kids. A full-size adult's a little bit more cramped back there, but you know, it's not a Jeep. It's supposed to be a UTV, though it's approaching the size of a Jeep, it feels like sometimes. The factory tires that came on at the Bighorns, I hear a lot of guys complain about these tires. And I swear, if a manufacturer wants to get a bad name for their tires, is just have a company use them as their factory tires from the factory. I don't know what it is. Everybody, if they come from the factory with whatever tire, they're people immediately assume they're terrible tires. I've actually had really decent luck. They provide decent traction. No real complaints besides they're a little low. You know, they could be a little bit bigger, which is one of the upgrades we kind of plan to do down the road. Since this machine does sit a little lower, we're going to put about a 2-inch lift on it with bigger tires. Now, I'm not a big fan of doing lifts and bigger tires on pretty much anything, because inevitably when you do that, you're creating wear and tear on some other part of the machine. You're putting extra stresses where the factory stuff really doesn't. Axles, rear ends, front ends. But in the case of this, I think it's probably worth the effort to do it. I'm not going to go crazy. It's just going to be, I think, maybe a 28-inch tire. I don't remember what these are, but gain about 2 or 3 inches of ground clearance, which would be nice, because when we're riding with folks that have a little more ground clearance, that's when we get into trouble with this machine. Trying to take it places that they just bomb through. This thing, because it's a little longer, because it's a 4-seat, and a lot of the people we ride with have 2-seat machines, so it's got a longer wheelbase, sits a little lower. We try and go through those same spots and wind up just getting stuck. Normally when you're riding with other people, it's not a big problem. Hook a winch onto one of them or a tree and you're out. Now, the position I'm sitting in right here, if I was stuck right there because it sat too low and I'm high centered in the snow, I'm far enough away from any tree, I don't think I could get to one to winch myself out. So it would require some digging. So that would be one of those times it'd be nice to have a little bit more ground clearance. I have taken this into locations that I didn't think there's any way this thing would actually make it. Places I take 4-wheelers and dirt bikes. This thing actually in a couple spots made it up easier than my 4-wheeler would have. Now it did hit the bottom a few times, but I think my 4-wheeler hits bottom in there too. It's just really rocky. It's an old cabin we like to go look at once in a while. And this thing made it up in there, surprisingly. So overall, it's been, you know, a really nice machine. Now, one of the things that we were talking about is we wanted a utility and a sport machine, something to do work around the homestead and then go out and have fun up in the mountains. Well, guess what? Come to find out, we have 2 4-wheelers sitting at home still. So what gets used for the utility work around the place? Those 4-wheelers. They're just so easy to go hop on them, go do your chore, and then go park the thing. Now, one of the reasons we may not use this as much as we thought we would for utility is it came with a tonneau cover on the back cargo area, which is super nice out on the trails to keep your stuff with less dust on it. I won't say it's dust proof, but you get a lot less dust in there, and it's fairly waterproof. So we spend most of the time out on trails having fun with this thing, so the tonneau cover kind of stays on. So to use it as a utility machine around the place, we'd have to pop that thing off if we want to stick buckets or tools back there, unless they're pretty small tools to fit under that cover. But most of the time it's bigger stuff we're wanting to work with. And that cover is kind of a pain in the butt to take on and off of that machine. So it doesn't wind up getting used as a utility machine. We use it a little bit as a utility machine. Now, if you're one of those folks that don't have 4-wheelers and you really need a true utility and sport machine, I think this thing's a fine machine. It's a good compromise between the two. We looked at some Hondas, which I was sure we were going to wind up with a Honda Pioneer. I think that's the name of them. And after we sat in it, we're like, man, this thing, even though we could go out in the mountains and have a little fun in it, it's not going to be like this machine. Once we laid eyes on this machine, this is kind of what we wanted. Now, been having it as long as we have, you know, the new shinies wore off, and we found some things we don't like about the machine. And I'm going to go through that list here shortly. Overall, I will say we really do enjoy the machine. We're not going to get rid of the machine, but there are a few things that we dislike. And if we had it to do over again and the money was sitting there, we probably would have bought a Maverick, a Can-Am Maverick X3 or something, the 4-seat version. But those are big machines. You might as well almost have a Jeep if you're going to buy one, but they do look like a lot of fun. I think it's the X3. It's the one that's a little more narrow. I get confused. They've got all these different models out there, so don't quote me on that. But, you know, it's about as wide as this one, but it sits a lot higher. I don't really care about the horsepower difference between the two machines. The turbo one, Maverick, has a lot more horsepower than this. I don't really care about this. This thing's got plenty of power for what we do. We're not out jumping over sand dunes and stuff. We're up in the mountains playing. We just would like a little bit more ground clearance is the main complaint with this machine. But there are a couple other, besides ground clearance, there's something I really truly dislike about this particular machine. And that is the shifter to go from, you know, park, neutral, drive. It's cable operated. You know, you're operating this level, but it's got cables going back to the transmission. 97% of the time, it's really not an issue. Maybe 95% of the time, it's not an issue. It shifts just fine. Every once in a while, you'll get in a position, you'll stop just right, and it's nearly impossible to get that thing to shift, either out of drive or into drive, and it's just, I just want to pull my hair out when it does it. It's annoyed me from the day we bought it, and it hasn't gotten any better. I thought, well, after we use it a while, maybe it'll get better. It really hasn't. It hasn't gotten any worse, but it hasn't gotten any better either. So that's my main complaint, is that darn shifter on that thing. It's just, it just drives me nuts when you get into one of those spots that you can't get it shifted either into drive or out of drive or into reverse. Man, I just want to pull my hair out. And if you can get it rocking a little bit, usually you can get it to shift. But, you know, it's not all that often it happens. And I don't know if some of the other machines that have that cable operated system have the same problem or not. I know this one does, and it drives me absolutely insane. Now, I mentioned the midship engine on this machine. Kind of sits in between the two passenger seats back there. It makes for a very well balanced machine. Like, I can go plowing through the snow, go up a lot of hills that you wouldn't really think you could take this kind of machine. And it's got a good weight balance to it. That part's great. The rest of the midship is kind of a mixed blessing. This time of the year, having a midship engine is pretty nice because it gets some extra heat in that cab. Feels like even up where the driver and passenger sit, that whole channel through there gets pretty warm. And it's kind of like laying next to a nice big warm dog when you're going down the road. So this time of the year, it's pretty nice. And in the spring and fall, it's kind of nice to have that extra heat in the cab. In the summer, 75, 80 degrees and up, man, that thing just will cook you out of there. Especially if you have the half windshield on, and like we have the doors on, it just traps the heat in there and you're just roasting the whole day. Now, one thing that's nice is that front windshield, it's just got Velcro that holds the straps onto the upright post. So if it's really warm, we just pop that windshield off. You can strap it on the back there and get some nice airflow through the cab. And it's really not that bad if you take the windshield off. Just remember, if you do that, you better have goggles with you. If you're riding with other folks, you're going to be eating dust all day, or you're going to be getting bugs and junk in your eye all day. So just something to be aware of with that midship engine. It's pretty dang warm in that cab. And if you live in a hot climate, man, I don't know if I'd put doors on this thing, honestly, if I was in a hot climate. You know, we don't have that much hot weather. We may hit 100 degrees a couple times a year. But, you know, like I said, it's a mixed blessing with that midship engine. The other thing about that engine is it kind of makes the cab noisy. All these machines are somewhat noisy, but having that engine right in the middle like that, it's pretty noisy going down the road. We bought a Tight Tops cover from a company, Tight Tops in Idaho, and it's taken care of some of the heat problem and some of the noise problem, but it's definitely not gone. It doesn't solve it altogether. And I haven't went through the trouble to put heat shielding on the inside of the plastic cover that covers the engine. I've read a lot of guys do that. I don't know, and like we take it out in the winter once in a while, like today. So it's kind of nice to have a little bit of heat in there once in a while. So I don't want to put that stuff on there because it glues on. So it's not easy to just go take it off. So I've just kind of, well, we'll just deal with the hot summers, take the windshield off and wear goggles. Now, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer about this machine. We really do enjoy this machine quite a bit. Like I said, there's just a few little quirks that I'm not particularly fond of. And again, I probably, having the hindsight in mind, I would probably not buy this machine for what we do. if you're looking for a true utility sport machine, this does fit the bill very well. We wound up probably more needing or wanting a sport machine more than a utility machine. So like I said, we probably would have looked at different options. Now, something that just popped into my head, I forgot to mention, was the radio, the stereo system that comes from the factory. I don't know how much that is if you went and bought it, but my personal opinion is it's a complete waste of time. That machine, because of the Midship engine, is so loud that you have to turn the stereo up so loud you can't hear yourself think. I mean, the thing, I'm like, why on earth? Unless you're going down the road 5 miles an hour, the stereo is completely useless. If you're parked next to a lake fishing, the stereo is some use to you. You can listen to something while you're fishing. Going down the road, in my opinion, it's a complete waste of time. I would not say that's a selling point for these limited edition machines at all. Which kind of brings me around to something else. If you're used to the old style 4-stroke engines where, you know, you get up to 3,000 or 4,000 RPM, you're kind of pushing it, or maybe 5,000 or 6,000 RPM, you know, you're definitely redlining that engine. Well, these things, these new 4-stroke engines, you know, I'm kind of old school. It just about blew my mind how high these things rev when you're using them. It's not uncommon at all to get up 8,000 RPM at, you know, just going down the road. I don't know what the red line is on it. I guess I should look. But these rev so much higher than the old style 4-stroke engines. And I'm used to driving diesel pickups where, you know, 2,500 RPM, whoa, you're up there in the RPM range. Well, these things, you know, clutch doesn't even engage till probably over 3,000 RPM. So that was quite a change for me. But along with that, it creates a lot of noise in the cab. And that's why I say the stereo is kind of useless. We've used it a little bit, you know, but we're going under 10 miles an hour, just putting down the road, trying to keep those RPMs down enough you could hear the thing. So, I don't know. To me, it's completely useless. If you do turn it up loud enough to hear it, you're just blowing yourself out of the cab. So, it's not a good feature for me personally. So, to wrap this whole thing up, yes, it's a good machine. Yes, it fits both purposes pretty darn good. It's neither one or the other great. It does both okay. But for me, because on the Homestead we've got 4-wheelers that we go do our work around the place on, this thing winds up being we're just using it as a sport machine. So why didn't we just go buy a sport machine? Okay. Thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate the subscriptions. Comments are always greatly appreciated. Thumbs up once in a while. We like those too. It's supposed to snow a lot the next few days. Up on our little ski area, we're supposed to get like 3 feet of snow from what I understand. I'm looking forward to it. Winter's been kind of a slow thing coming this year, and I really enjoy the winter. Even though I don't have a snowmobile right now, I still really enjoy the winter. It's been good to get out today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.